everyone. Welcome back to The Great Retention with Kamber Parker Bowden, sponsored by Generational Performance Solutions. I'm Kamber, founder and CEO of GPS, where we bring you strategies to cultivate a high-performing and committed team in a rapidly changing workplace. Whether you're looking to enhance cross-generational communication or navigate generational dynamics in the office or at home, you've come to the right place. Today, I welcome Hannah Williams, co-creator and host of Salary Transparent Street, joining me from Washington, D.C. Salary Transparent Street began as a social media account with a simple mission: meet people on the street and discuss their careers and compensation, which I love, by the way. However, it has quickly grown into a social media force with millions of followers across platforms, a podcast called 2 Cents, and a full-scale business featuring a salary database, a resource hub for workers. This is so cool. And has recently been acquired by Now This Media. Hannah and her husband built STS from the ground up with a mission to increase pay transparency and remove the stigma from discussing compensation. I'm thrilled to have her join me virtually today to discuss the current status of workforce pay and her perspective on compensation across generations, along with the rise of influencer side hustles. Hannah, welcome to the show.
Kamber, thank you so much for having me. Wow, what a cool intro. I hope the rest of the interview really keeps that going.
Well, it's hard. I mean, what a cool business you have built, and at such an early stage in your career too, which is just incredible. So I'm really excited for our guests and listeners who maybe don't know what you do. I'm really excited for them to learn more today. But first, let's get started, Hannah, with a little lightning round.
Okay.
So in a few sentences or less, tell us something that is not on your resume.
Ooh, not on my resume is probably all my fast food jobs that I started from 16 and got me through college. Those are the ones that no one really cares about, the little part-time jobs. But I think it was really crucial for me to learn how to work, how to get a paycheck, a lot of workers' rights that I learned the hard way. And customer service, which is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Short and sweet. Thank you. If you had not created STS, what would you be doing?
I'd probably still be a data analyst.
Yeah. That seems to be like your thing.
Yep.
What is the best advice you've received from a mentor?
Never burn bridges. I think that has been key, especially since I've quit a lot of jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you never know when that person might come back around or when you want to come back around. So great advice. And tell me about your preferred style of communication. What does that look like?
I love a good voice memo. That might be odd. I know some people in my generation, I call myself geriatric Gen Z, but I'm really just a very young millennial.
I love that. I haven't really heard that one yet.
I am scared of a phone call. Sometimes a text feels too much, but a voice memo is a way that I can connect with my friends without overthinking it.
Yeah, love that. All right, so let's talk about Salary Transparent Street. Obviously, give us a little bit of a background on what this is if people don't know. But you really have become a leading voice in salary transparency and workers' rights in just a few years, reaching over 3.3 million followers across channels. You started the business in 2022, so the level of growth you've achieved in such a short period of time is really nothing short of phenomenal. So again, just congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you and James came up with the idea and why you saw the need? And then in the process, just give us a little bit of background and context.
Yeah, so the idea for Salary Transparent Street really just came about by personal experience. Before starting it, my husband and I were both government contractors in the DC metro area. More specifically, I was a senior data analyst on a government contract. And around 2021, I forget when, but I found out the hard way that I was underpaid about $25,000. It was my first time doing market research and trying to see what my role was worth because I had an inkling that I was underpaid and found out I was underpaid very much so by about 25 grand. Went to my boss and, thought that it would be as simple as look at all this data, look at what other people are paying. You should value me. That's not what happened. They told me since I had just started at the company, I hadn't been there a year, that I didn't even qualify for a raise until I was at the company for a year. And even if I did, I would only get 3 to 5%, which was usually what they would offer. So I was looking at the math, doing the math and trying to figure out how long would I have to be here to make my worth. And by the time I made my worth, it would have already been outpaced with inflation and time. So I took the hard route and started looking for another job, knowing what I could now ask for. But I still didn't have full transparency. And what I mean by that is in my very first job interview, the recruiter asked me, what are your salary requirements? And this is 2021, pay transparency was not as normalized. So I took a chance because I was like, I know my range is between 100 to 125. I fall somewhere within there, but I don't know what I'm worth. I was ready to ask for 105, which was 15 grand more than I was making prior. I thought that would have been a great raise. But I decided to ask, what are your salary requirements? Do you mind giving me a little bit of the budget? And I give this recruiter so much credit because she didn't skip a beat and she told me the budget was 115 grand flat. And I was like, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And it was like, it fell within the range that I knew I was worth, but it was 10 grand more than I was ready to ask for. And just having that transparency from the recruiter was everything. There was no way that they were going to tell me, hey, you left 10 grand on the table. Like,
right.
Here, we'll give it
not.
to you. Absolutely not. So funny enough, I actually received an offer from that company, accepted it, was making 115 grand, knew I was well compensated. But I couldn't shake the fact that, okay, I fixed my situation, but the system is still inherently broken. There's still a lot that needs to be fixed. And so I noodled on it for a little bit. I thought, what can a little person like me do? I didn't have a platform. I didn't have a voice. And I had seen some creators going out there and doing street interviews. And it came to me like a light bulb. Let me go ask, and it was just this idea that it was okay to fail. I didn't have my entire life gambling on this risk. It was just an idea. And I had my husband come out with me. I was like, hey, do you mind just filming this silly little project that I want to do? Let's see if we inspire people to do some pay transparency and start talking about it. Mm-hmm. That's not what happened. Started the channel. It went massively viral overnight, which really validated that I was like, this is a problem that needs solving.
This is important.
And it went so viral that I ended up quitting my job 3 weeks after our first video. My husband
3 weeks
followed
after?
Me.
Oh
Yes.
My goodness. That's fast.
And my husband followed me about a month afterwards because it was going so fast. I was already talking to these brands for partnerships. I was getting media interviews. I wasn't able to do my 9 to 5. And then my boss, there were conversations around the office like, hey, have you seen what Hannah's been doing?
Yeah.
And so I decided to take the leap of faith. And I said it earlier, but I really have this mindset that failure is not a bad thing. I think I was really afraid of it when I was a lot younger, but now I see it as an opportunity. And I kept telling myself, I have a runway. I've got 6 months of savings, so I have something to build off of. But let's go all in. Let's do this thing. Like, if it doesn't work out, I have the coolest story to tell. I launched this viral platform. It didn't pan out. Like I said, I don't burn bridges. And my boss told me, if this doesn't work out, come back. So I knew I had a soft landing, but that was the story of how it came about.
Yeah, I love that story so much. And I have to ask, this is a curveball question. I told you I might ask them, and here I am asking them question one. So I'm always so curious when I think about creators and learn about creators, the fact that you were able to leave your job after 3 weeks and your husband after a month after, that's pretty wild. So what does that process even look like? Is it just you had some viral videos and so people reached out? You essentially had brand deals that were you could replace with your current income, which is crazy. Is that accurate to say?
100%. And then some. I had no idea when we first started the money in the creator industry.
Yeah.
I was thinking, okay, I'll make enough to replace my salary, which was 115 grand. My husband was making, I believe, 110. So we were like, okay, if we make around 200 grand, we're good. I think we made over $600,000 in that first year. And it wasn't even a full year because we started in April. And how that looks is what gave me the courage, taking a step back, what gave me the courage to quit the job was really having my husband and I had 6 months of emergency savings. So we knew, okay, we can pay our mortgage, we can pay the bills, and we can go all in on this and focus and try to monetize. And then what gave us the encouragement that we knew that monetization was around the corner was within those first few weeks, we had conversations working, talking about partnerships with Monster, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, Indeed, and one more. Every job board you could think of was wanting to partner with us. And I was starting to think, okay, well, that's just job boards. We can partner with universities. We can partner with schools. We can teach people how to do these things. We can build a database. And it just became very quickly something that would make a lot more than just our salaries.
Yeah, that's so cool. Thank you for the transparency, right? Not surprised, but I love this candor.
Yeah.
So we speak to a lot of business leaders who are pretty skeptical about the work ethic of younger team members, specifically Gen Z. And you spend a lot of time talking to actual workers across industries and cities all across the country. And you specifically ask them about their salaries and if they actually like what they do. Do you get the sense that Gen Z cares less about their careers than other generations? And what do you think business leaders might be misunderstanding about them? So a loaded question, right? I'd love to hear, maybe we can dissect that question a bit by just saying first, like, what are you hearing on the streets, right? Like, what are you hearing people telling you about like what their expectations are and just, dissect that question however you want.
Yeah, there's layers to that for sure.
Yeah.
I think the top layer that I get from conversations with Gen Z and younger millennials is there is passion for work, but it's about the work that they're doing. And I think when I hear any friction and, I get an inkling that they're not very passionate about their work or there's something more to the story, it usually goes back to just feeling valued. And I think that's a big part of what we do is that it points out how valuable pay is to the workplace and people's ethics in the workplace. When I was working and I found out that I was underpaid, I, for the most part, loved my job. I loved what I was doing, but I was ready to go because I felt it was a little bit disrespectful. And I felt slighted by the fact that the company knew that I was worth more and willingly underpaid me. And when the data was out there, and it was incredibly demoralizing. And what I think is really interesting that I wish more business leaders would do more research on that I've looked into is that pay transparency is one of those factors that has many positive implications to a workplace. Paying workers what they know they're worth and having a transparent policy leads to increased productivity in the office, better employee morale, and all those things come together to make the company more money. If your workers feel like they're well valued, they work harder, they're more productive, they bring more energy, and ultimately the leadership, and shareholders get bang for their buck. So it's frustrating when I hear and I'm seeing a lot of trends of workers not receiving what they're worth. And I'm like, if only companies knew that they could completely shift this tide that we're seeing with negative sentiment in the workplace just by valuing their workers and paying them what they're worth. And I think that Gen Z and younger millennials from my conversations, they're the ones that are the most, they're the ones that are the most upfront about those things. Yeah. I think millennials, more general average millennials and older, are kind of used to sipping the Kool-Aid. And I'm not blaming them and I'm not pitting one generation against the other. I don't blame them at all because it's how they were raised. It's what they were taught, right? These older generations were taught, don't shake things up. Don't bring too much attention to yourself. Don't complain about pay. Don't ask for more. Don't negotiate. And all those lessons, result in this generation that is a little stuck in their ways versus the younger generation is now hearing about these positive things with pay transparency and being paid well. And they're like, well, this makes no sense. And so I think there's a little bit more anger from their generation, the younger generation, of wanting to be valued more because the data is proving it. And the older generation is kind of just stuck in their ways.
Yeah. Thank you for, again, your transparency. I think you put it really eloquently. And when you interview people, I want to have another conversation with you to talk just about logistics because I'm very curious about that. But you end up speaking to an incredibly wide variety of people from ages, industries, skilled trades, corporate jobs across a lot of areas and regions. Have you noticed any patterns or overarching themes in the sentiment surrounding pay that is consistent across your diverse group of interviewees?
Yes. Across industries in particular, anytime I interview someone in education, I know I'm not going to hear a good number. And if it's a good number and I ask about pay, I know they're going to say something about I know I'm not well compensated and I'm upset about it. B, I know I'm not well compensated, but that's just the way it is. I'm okay with it. Or C, I am well compensated, but I know many others aren't. So education is just very sad. In majority, I would say the majority of social services are the workers that I hear have the most antagonism with their pay, and rightfully so. They're the least valued financially with their pay. But then I am seeing trends of tech workers used to be the highest paid, and there was a lot of push towards workers getting into tech. And now with AI on the rise, I've seen a lot of cooling of tech salaries. I'm not as frequently hearing crazy sums that I was used to, I would say, a year or two ago. I would also say that I'm seeing a lot of consistency with healthcare jobs. That seems like a really good sector to look into if you're looking for something new. That one, I'm hearing a lot of people are being hired, which is difficult in this job market right now, but they're also getting somewhat fair pay. But education and social services always make me so sad. And another one that I would say is also another good one is construction and trades, especially women and diverse workers. I would massively encourage them to look into the trades. It's one of those sectors that has, I'd say, the most AI protection. No one, AI is not going to plumb your toilet or unclog it. And we need those workers. And I think there's a huge need for more diversity in that field as well.
Yeah, thank you. I would say I echo all of that based on the conversations that I'm having right now. We actually just had an education administrator earlier today speaking about the challenges, right, of attracting and retaining talent. And we spoke to a healthcare leader who was sharing exactly what you just did, which is like healthcare is probably the least impacted by AI at this point in time. They're probably going to be the most benefited from that because they can use AI to help advance their patient care, which is incredible. But they still need physical humans, right? So really great to hear all of that. And it also for people listening who might be, looking for jobs, like and future young professionals, very important to hear that. Earlier this year, Gallup reported that employee engagement has continued to decline since 2020, and the largest declines are in Gen Z and younger millennials. So really where you and I sit, like we're kind of on that cusp between millennial and Gen Z. How important do you think that compensation is in engaging and retaining talent? Which, let's be honest, I know that you are going to say yes, right? So it is very important. But do you think it ranks differently for members of different generations or stages of life? And like, again, you've had hundreds. I mean, how many interviews have you done?
Well over 1,000. I think I stopped counting after 1,000.
So 1,000 plus, like you've heard from it all. So what are you seeing in terms of that ranking? Like, because I think the narrative out there about Gen Z is like they actually don't care about salary as much. And I'm usually the first person to say that's not true. Like they are very, very concerned about their financial stability. But maybe tell us just from your side of the street, since you are, you're on the streets with these people. So you tell us.
I think your instinct is totally 100% spot on there. I would say younger millennials and Gen Z, it's the number one thing on their minds. And I think they get demonized a little bit. They get a little villainization in the media for only caring about pay, but you have to consider where this generation is in their lives. They're starting their lives at the same time that a lot of people in older generations at the same age were building families. They were looking to buy a home. They're starting to grow, and starting to build generational wealth, as they like to say. And there's zero opportunity for that. There's no way they can buy a home in this market. There's hardly any growth in salaries available for them. I mean, the job market is a disaster right now, even if they want to try to find something different. And so I think it's only fair that pay is at the top of their minds because it's the only way that they can create opportunities for themselves in their lives and their careers. So that makes a lot of sense. I would say that it is still top of mind for older generations. And I would say more average millennials, I would say it's still pretty up there. Where I start seeing a little bit of change is, I would say, in Gen X and boomers. I love to interview boomers. They're some of my favorite, even though they're the hardest to get because they hear that I'm asking about pay and they just run the other direction 99% of the time, which is also interesting to see how different generations react to this conversation. But when I have been able to talk to them, one thing I hear more often than not isn't make as much money or ask for more. It's sort of a piece of advice that I take with a grain of salt, but I hear all the time, do what you love, do what makes you passionate. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think living a good life means enjoying your work. And I think that is important. But at the end of the day, I also think that there's value to having that distinction between your personal life and not monetizing your hobbies and keeping a hobby and having your 9 to 5. And I think in America, we really just take a lot of identity in our 9 to 5. But I think what they're pointing out, the older generation, what they're trying to tell us is enjoy your work, but live a life outside of it as well. And the pay is way less top of mind for them. But they also, have the privilege of being at the end of their careers where they're probably making more than they did younger. So
exactly.
Hindsight is 2020.
Yeah, well said. And I mean, one of our big talking points and data that we see is it's really so little about like just the generation that you're in, and it's about the career stage and life stage that you're in, right? So like the baby boomers were once in the launch phase of their career, which is where Gen Z really sits today. Mm-hmm. Then they went into like the building phase, and then the peak phase, and then the transition phase, right? Like there's these major kind of career life cycles, and you evolve, your motivations change. But I think it's what I'm hearing from what you shared. I mean, there's a lot of takeaways, but like compensation does rank number one for these younger workers. So what are you seeing as the second most important piece of compensation? Because we're not just talking about salary at this point, right? Like there's so much more in your total compensation package. Yeah. So what are the people that you're talking to? What are they looking for from their employers?
I think they're looking for, honestly, understanding. And that's where I think pay transparency is such it's a robust subject, because it's not as simple as, okay, the pay range for this role is X to X. Pay transparency means when you talk to a worker and they say how much they make, they know exactly why they make what they make. And that's going to be informed by education, years of experience, industry, location, a number of things. And a lot of workers that I talk to, if I were to ask them, do you know why you make what you make? I would guarantee a lot of them would say no. And I think their managers would as well. So I think that the frustration there is not just, oh, I make this much, I'm upset. It's I make this little and I don't know what's possible, or I don't know what it should be. So I think there's that frustration that accompanies pay. And I think if we blurred those, if we didn't blur those lines so much, and management was more upfront about this is why we're paying you this much and being more transparent, I think there would be a little less friction like that in the office. But also another thing that I wanted to point out is with the generation comparison is that a lot of workers today in the same role as their grandfather at the same stage of life are making less than their grandparent did. And what I mean by that comparison is our pay just has not kept up with inflation and time. And so I think there's just a lot of frustration there with feeling like this should be good compensation. Like I remember when I hit $100,000 when I got my raise and thinking, I'm rich. This is more money than this is more money than I ever thought I'd make at that age. And then you see the bills and you're like, wait, it's not as much as I thought. And so I think there's just a lot of frustration there with it just never feeling like enough. Yeah.
On that same note, Hannah, I want to talk a little bit. I mean, you earlier in your first response to me, you said, you found the system was broken. And so something that we have spoken about on our own platforms at GPS is the way that salary expectations deepen the generational divides in the workplace. And what I mean by that is a person scrolling on social media who's younger might see somebody their age share about how much they make, right? Or like, hey, I'm in this industry. You could be making, $150 right now, kind of that kind of thing. And they use that anecdote as justification for asking for a larger salary. And then their boss finds the request, who is maybe more senior, to be too high and sees them as just another entitled Gen Zer, which I have had these conversations often. When I first started this business, the biggest complaint that I received was they just want they're asking for ridiculous salaries up front. Like these 21-year-olds, like this is ridiculous. So
Yeah.
they lump them up. They start to make assumptions. And so I think this is a big reason of why this system is broken, but how do we fix it and bridge generational divides in the process? So I would love to hear first your thoughts on that, like all of that. And then two, like what's the solution?
No, I totally agree. You're so spot on. And I see comments like that all the time where people are like, realizing I'm underpaid watching this, or can I send this to my boss? And I want to tell them like, pump the brakes, like don't do that.
Wait a second.
Yes. And I think that through the course of this channel, it has led me to realize like, okay, the first step was missing transparency. Like we had no access to pay information. The second step is fixing, how we understand that information and where we fall within this mass jumble of data. And ultimately, actually, this whole problem led me to want to create our salary database, because when I was doing my research and trying to figure out what I was supposed to be making, I went to Indeed, I went to LinkedIn, I went to all the job boards. And what I found was aggregated data. Like I would look up how much does a data analyst make in Washington, D.C. And they would tell me like, oh, well, the average is this. But that didn't help me. I needed to know how much does somebody in the same role as me, in the same industry, with the same years of experience, all these really important career factors, how do I compare to them? That's what's needed. And so you need further grouping and further factors incorporated into this data to see where you fall. And so ultimately, I created our salary database, which is an individually searchable database. So you can look up how much does a senior data analyst make in Indianapolis, and you get every result back for anyone that submitted their data to our database that is a senior data analyst in Indianapolis. And then you can further filter by the years of experience, education, and stuff. So the goal was really to connect people with that information that was missing. But it's a huge problem. And I think until we get that corporate buy-in and we start getting, the Fortune 500 buy-in, the system's going to stay largely the same until it becomes normalized nationwide.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm sure that you've come across a lot of people who discuss their experiences negotiating for fairer pay at work.
Yeah.
What are the biggest tips for people entering compensation negotiation, not only for the employee, but maybe for the boss who is listening on the receiving end of the conversation, who might be listening to this conversation today? What are some tips you have for those people?
I think I'll start from the boss side. And I think what I would share with the boss is if it's kind of coming out the blue, outside of the regular, what's the word?
Like annual meeting.
Thank you.
Or annual review. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. If it's falling outside of the annual review period, then I think it's an important time or a really good time to connect with the employee and try to get a sense of where are they at in their lives and what is the reason for the request? Is it because there's always something there? And I think that workers are scared to be transparent with their employers, especially if they're asking for a raise not relevant to, performance or tenure. Maybe they're asking for a raise because they just can't afford to support their families anymore. Maybe they had to move. There's a lot of factors like that. And so I think that's a difficult, I wouldn't say that I know how to handle that from a manager's perspective, but I do think if you work at a smaller company, the best way to show that you value that employee and to guarantee that they stick around is to pay them fairly. And so if there's something happening in the background that you can figure out, I think there's a lot of value in having that conversation with the employee and trying to meet them halfway. But from the employee side, the most important thing is to document everything. Also, don't go in guns blazing, walking into your manager's office and saying, we're going to talk about pay right now. I'm upset. Definitely don't do that. Always make sure that you set up time with your manager, not right away, like schedule a time, 30 minutes, and let them know the purpose of the conversation so that they can prepare as well. Because they might have to ask, their manager, what am I allowed to give if I know my employee is asking for a raise? So let them figure out stuff in the background as well, but set the time. And then when you come to that meeting, you want to have in a piece of paper, a document, print it out, one copy for your manager, one copy for you and whoever else is at the table. all this information that you're going to compile beforehand to justify your raise. And it's not going to be the TikTok video. It's not going to be salary transparency. Don't link my video. I mean, if you want it as part of your justification, if it makes sense, sure, but do the research. Find at least 3 to 5 different valid sources that you can use to back up your request. Do the research, look at those factors, the location, industry, years of experience, education, and talk about your performance. The most important thing you can point out is data-backed performance, ways that you have helped make the company more money, made your office more productive, anything like that that you can assign a data point to is what management is going to really like lock onto. If you just say, I'm a great worker, but you don't have a data point or anything to back that up, it's going to be a lot harder to defend. But and be prepared. I think that's the most important thing, and follow up so you have a paper trail. But those are my big tips.
I think that's really well said. And again, like you're the data expert, you're the data analyst here. So people need to listen when you speak, honestly, because you have some really great wisdom to share.
Thank
you.
You.
Finally, as we wrap up, I'm going to ask you in a moment if is there anything else that you feel like we haven't covered that you want to end with. But I would love to just kind of come full circle here. We mentioned in our intro that, you were recently acquired. I'd love to kind of learn about that. And then tell us a little bit about your own podcast and where people can listen. Like, how can we find you?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, very exciting news in my orbit. Earlier this year, we were acqui-hired by Now This, which is a little different than an acquisition. And I'm glad you asked about it because I love teaching people about it because I had no idea it existed before either. But, at the end of last year, towards the end of last year, I transparently was really reaching a burnout point. We had a very small team. It was me and my husband doing this for nearly 4 years. And I wore every hat you could imagine. I was the talent. I was the street interviewer. I was the editor. I was the poster. I was the engager. I was sales. I was doing all the things. And it was frankly too much and really hard to hire for. And I just got to the point where I didn't have the energy to hire and keep it going. So we started exploring acquisition, and it was difficult because I think as a creator, this is my baby. This is something that I really value and feel so personal, such a personal connection with. And I wanted to make sure that whoever we partnered with had the same values and mission, because ultimately our mission is a little political. Pay is political. I've been really lucky and grateful to have testified in support of 3 pay transparency bills in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. DC, Maryland passed, and Virginia passed twice, but then was vetoed at the governor's desk. So we're hoping that gets passed this year. But ultimately, I knew our power and what change we could influence. And I didn't want to just partner with some media company that only saw views and didn't see the underlying mission. And Now This just came to us as a really great partner as an option because they have an impact side. They aligned with us politically and in our values. And every idea I brought to them, they saw, they could envision. And I hadn't encountered that before. So it took several months of negotiation because I also negotiated our value. I didn't just take the first number.
Of course you did.
That's what I told them. I was like, you already know I'm going to negotiate this.
Yeah. I'm bringing data to the table.
You already know. So, and they knew, they appreciated it, and that made me appreciate them even more. And so we came to an agreement for a really great number that I'm not allowed to share for legal reasons, but I can share that it's in the realm of 7 figures based on performance. So we feel really good about the value that we set for ourselves and the goals as well. And I'm also now a supervising producer at Now This, still the host of Salary Transparency, but I can share my salary there. So as supervising producer at Now This, I make $150,000 a year. And my husband makes $100,000 a year as our cameraman still and producer. So there's a little bit of transparency. We're excited about it.
That's really wonderful. And so how can people find you today if they are really excited by this interview like I am? Where's the best place for them to go?
Thanks. Yeah. So you can still find us at Salary Transparency on all socials, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. I had to get the gamut because my parents didn't have TikTok back in the day. So I was like, you can't run from us. We're everywhere. But we also have a podcast called 2 Cents. My husband and I were doing it by ourselves prior to the acqui-hire. And we had these goals of, a studio and great guests. And we just weren't able to make it happen by ourselves. But now with Now This, it is happening. So we have about 2 to 3 episodes out now with like key thought leaders like Tim Chuzano and Amanda Holden. And we have really exciting guests. So if you want to tune into the 2 Cents podcast, you can find it at Salary Transparency as well. But we have lots of exciting things in store this year.
Great. Well, I will definitely stay tuned. Hannah, this has been amazing. Is there anything else you want to leave our audience with before we wrap up?
I feel like I should leave on an inspirational message or something. Yeah. I think the only thing I would say is do the research. If you feel like you're not being well compensated, go find that data. Talk to your coworkers, and also know your rights. A lot of people don't know that it's their legal right to talk about their pay. It's protected. It's a federal law, the National Labor Relations Act. If you want to look into it and whether or not you're a protected group or not, I strongly recommend doing that research, and knowing what your rights are is just going to make you feel so much more empowered in the workplace, and make sure you're getting paid what you deserve.
Hannah, thank you so much for joining me on The Great Retention. That was a really amazing episode. We're thrilled to have you.
Thanks, Kamber. It was a pleasure.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us again on The Great Retention. Before you go, remember this: the generational landscape is shifting, and today's workforce is not the same one we once knew. Our mission is to help you save time and money by identifying these shifts and demystifying generational differences through our workshops, programs, and workforce planning. Contact us today if you're interested in transforming your multi-generational team, and let's drive your business towards long-term sustainability and success. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. This helps others know where to find episodes about this topic, and don't forget to share with your coworkers. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.